Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to this month's CAD Chats. I'm very excited to be with you all this month. It's been kind of a crazy week, but we're all here and I'm very excited to welcome this month's interviewee and the person I'm chatting with. And Finn has just joined. So, Finn, go ahead and request to be on. And there you are. And she is coming in, I think. Hello.
Hi, how
How
are
are you?
you?
Good. I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. Busy day.
Same. Same. Like you would not even believe. It's a little crazy here, but we're here. It's the end of the day, and we're on CAD Chats, and I'm very excited to actually speak to you, person to person, and not be leaving you voice messages on LinkedIn.
Yes, yeah, I remember that, yeah.
Awesome, awesome. Well, I'm looking for the questions, but in the interim, why don't you go ahead and let's just start because this goes very quickly and introduce yourself and let us know how you got into fashion.
So I'm Finn. I got into fashion about a little over 10 years ago. It's my second career. I used to be a professional ballet and modern dancer, and I had to retire
Wow.
because my body said no more. And I had to find something that was equally technical and creative that really could go the distance with me for the rest of my life. And so I went to this, people had been telling me for a long time, go to this fashion program, you'd be so great at it. I said, no way, I cannot go back to school for art. And they had a prereq quarter where basically, the sewing tolerance was a 16th of an inch, the pattern making tolerance was a 32nd of an inch. It was incredibly demanding and much more challenging than I expected. And I was like, okay, I'm sold. So I was in Seattle and I did that program. And then I graduated and moved to New York. And um, I no one would hire me, so I got internships. I got one at Cynthia Rowley, and then after that, it was kind of off to the races. And
Nice.
I've worked for Ralph Lauren. I worked at J. Crew when Jenna was there. I've worked for Banana Republic. I've freelanced everywhere. I've done every category: children's, men's, everything,
Wow.
women. Yeah, so now I freelance and I'm working for a company called Stateless.
Mhm.
They're a design and consulting firm, and it's a nice little small team, and we have a lot of clients. And so now I work as a designer for them full time.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow. That's exciting. That's like you've had like a whirlwind in like a very short time.
yeah.
Cool. Very cool. So, with all of that experience under your belt, what digital software do you primarily use and how do you use it?
So it's interesting because for the past, it used to always be Illustrator,
Hmm.
and I had to actually learn how to sketch in
Hmm.
Illustrator before I learned how to sketch by hand. And in school, I was taught to sketch everything to 1/8 inch scale of my pattern. Thank God I don't
Wow.
have to do that anymore.
Yeah.
Like a glutton for punishment. And my very first job in New York, I had my boss, who used to be a fashion illustrator who taught herself Adobe Illustrator later. So she taught me how to sketch in Illustrator. I had to sketch 8 hours a day. I had to sketch floats and flats and everything, children's in different sizes. And if it wasn't a float, the merchandisers wouldn't get it, and the style would die. So then you had to sketch a flat for the factory. So it was always Illustrator until about 4 years ago, I fell in love with Clo 3D, and that became my obsession.
Hmm.
And now I've had to go back at this new job and sketch in Illustrator again after a little bit of a break. So those are my
Wow.
main two. Yeah.
Yeah, Illustrator, it feels like it never goes away. It's
Nope.
it's always there
Yeah.
lingering.
It's like playing the piano. All the little shortcuts are still in my brain. I thought
Yep.
I'd forgotten them all, but I hadn't.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Chloe, I feel like has a lot of things about it that feel sort of Illustrator-esque, except I don't know about you, but I used to use the spacebar shortcut. And
Oh
so for
yeah.
a long time in the beginning of using Chloe, I was like, my clothes just kept falling to the ground because I was always using the spacebar. And I was like, nope, that's not
Yep.
it.
I still do that too. If I haven't been in the program for a while, I always
Mm.
hit that space bar and yep. That's why we have undo.
Exactly. That part, that part. Do you use anything else?
Um, so I tend to I use my iPad to start sketches on. So for that, I will use like Adobe Fresco, which is like a
Hmm.
Procreate.
Hmm.
And then I'll go into Adobe. I do use Photoshop as well. And then I also know how to use Maya to do hard surface modeling, and
Get
I know
out
how
of
to use
here.
Mari. I just went to like a 12-week 3D program thinking about maybe being a video game designer, and I decided
Wow.
against that, but I do know how to use those things a bit now. So
What was the other one? Mari?
Mari is basically it's what they use in film to
Uh-huh.
do all the texturing,
Yeah.
and I don't find it as useful as my next up on my list is to learn Adobe Substance. I much would have preferred that workflow for fashion, but Mari was cool to
Yeah.
learn.
Yeah. That is cool. Yeah, I'm on the fence about substance because it seems very intimidating. Like even more intimidating than Chloe was. And even today, I went to PI Apparel the last 2 days, and Adobe had a booth there, but they were mostly talking about substance because there was a lot of talk about 3D and AI and blah blah blah. And I was gonna go over there, and I was like, I'm intimidated.
It is scary, yeah. And I mean, that's one of the reasons I really wanted to take that 3D course is because there's a point where, Chloe, you can't really do anymore. And if there's like certain difficult things that are, maybe harder surfaces or things where you really have to trick the program into denying the physics it wants to do, to cheat, I guess you could say. It's just like I know there's a better tool for that. And I really wanted to see what that side of the world was about in
Yeah.
3D and see how I felt about it and see if I liked
Hmm.
it. It was definitely more challenging. It made me really appreciate Chloe that much more. Just like learning, I do a little bit of browseware, but I'm terrible at it. I much prefer Chloe.
Hmm.
And so the texturing thing was what I was most excited about to be able to do that stuff that we can't like quite get in Chloe,
Right.
like distressing and like, all that final touch that can make something look really cool to kind of make it so you could pre-sale it or whatnot. Because sometimes clients do ask for those difficult things like denim and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I wanted to get over it. Like I wanted to be able to just do anything anybody thought of. And I think that Substance is an easier program for that. Mari is
Really.
like harder than Substance
Mm-hmm.
because it's like there's no cheating. You have to build everything and all these different layers. It's like Photoshop on steroids. I can't say I like it.
Now, you mentioned something about browseware, and I want to get your opinion on this. So, I am of the opinion that Chloe is a very designer friendly program, and browseware is much more tech design friendly. Do you feel that way when you've worked in it?
Yeah, so browseware is definitely, I feel like the physics for the fabrics are more accurate.
Hmm.
Browseware shows a lot more sins in the pattern, whereas Chloe doesn't.
Hmm.
I definitely feel like the render engine built into Chloe is much nicer and much better. And that's because Chloe actually came from a video game company and it was created by them. And also, they have another program called Marvelous Designer. That is what anytime a video game character is dressed or you see a character in a film where their garments are generated, they're using Marvelous Designer, which is just the non steam allowance fashion for production
Right.
version of Chloe.
Right.
And so, all of these things are built into this program, and there's more and more things being built in. Like they just made some new updates this past week that I saw yesterday where all of your maps can be generated now through Chloe instead of having to go into Photoshop and make them. Or, yeah, that was one of the new ones. Also, there's some AI stuff that got built into Chloe. So, it's like everyone's always kind of one-upping each other.
Yeah.
And then I'm learning Style 3D for my new job. So it's like I'm kind of getting the gamut of learning as much as I can. And I feel like Style 3D is based on Chloe. So I'm curious to see how that
Okay.
works. And also, I think they might use some Unreal
Yeah.
Engine stuff to help
So
with the real-time
I
rendering.
was gonna ask, how do you feel about Style 3D? Because I just saw them at PI Apparel, and I got a demo from them like years ago, and I was just like, yeah, this kind of looks this cool, blah. But there were certain things about it, which for the life of me, I cannot remember what it was, but there was something about it that I felt like, okay, if you're in fashion and you're trying to create physical products, this isn't really the best program for that. But I mentioned that to them at the at PI Apparel when I saw them at the table, and they said that they were trying to like fill the gaps and fill the holes. They aren't quite there yet, but there were some things that I really thought were really cool, like that whole like when you can like create a store.
Hmm.
I was at the time that I saw it, they were still working on that, and they hadn't released it, but I was just like, this is cool.
Yeah, I haven't downloaded the trial yet. I've literally been so slammed. But we're supposed to be training in it pretty soon, and I'm curious to see how it works.
Yeah.
I see, do you know what Unreal Engine is?
Yes.
Yeah, so
Yes.
basically it's rendering in real time, so you don't have to like wait as long, and so I think there's less collision issues and things. So I'm curious to see how that operates in Style
Yeah.
3D. But I also am such a Clo lover, and I know how much work and technology has gone into that program and mastering that program, that for someone to come in after, I have doubts about, how well that's going to function. But
Mm-hmm.
also because of the company that I work for right now, the ideal candidate for 3D is a company that works with very like the same qualities all the time, that can scan them, that works with similar blocks. That's the easiest way to get into 3D. I'm starting to try to help the company working for integrate 3D into their ideation, not just their technical design practices. And
Mm.
so, when you have a bazillion clients all using different fabrics, all using different things, and no one's making like an easy hoodie, these are all complicated styles with
Right.
a lot of, and they're all made in different countries. And so maybe the factory doesn't want to work with your pattern or take your pattern. And so it's also the partners on the other side need to be receptive to it. How do we use this to ideate in 3D? And how
Right.
do we like incorporate AI, maybe if they're not going to make a pattern, to just pitch ideas to a client more quickly with more realism without having to do all the work of creating the patterns. And
Yeah.
I feel like they're interested in Style 3D because of that. But Chloe also just this week came out with something like that where you could do that. There's also companies that will take your 3D and then basically put a real person in it and make it look so lifelike that you could throw it on your website.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of that happening right now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And in the end, I did watch a Style 3D. It was like one of the seminars they had, and it was the main physics officer guy talking about how we're getting pretty close to the AI being able to start making patterns. So it's
Yeah.
kind of fascinating because that I think we're never going to be fully working in 3D until we can get over stuff like that, because I'm a good pattern maker, but I'm not a production pattern maker. And
Right.
so I would never want
Same.
someone to take my pattern and use it for production.
Same.
But that doesn't mean I can't make
Same.
like a totally killer, 3D thing and make all the textures and I can make the trims, like, you know what I mean? But that's a lot of work in itself. And to do that for every single client without a library to start from is an enormous task.
Yeah. Yeah. It is. It is. Wow.
Sorry,
Okay.
that was a lot.
But so cool. Like I'm eating it all up. Okay. What do you enjoy most about using digital design software?
Um, I love the speed, when I'm sketching a lot of ideas and I want to do two or three ideas.
Hmm.
For somebody, it's really nice to just like pull it over, do different iterations and kind of see what they like, take a step back. It makes everything much faster. It's very clear where the
Yeah.
stitches are. There's no interpretations of what you meant. Um, when I worked at J. Crew, we didn't use CAD. They were very much only the tech design team used CAD, and for a couple of years I had to sketch by hand, and it was very painful to photocopy my body of sketch and then insert new design lines.
Yeah.
Don't prefer
Yeah. Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Um, what do you think is most beneficial? You might have just said it.
Yeah, I mean speed, but also, the idea of being able to show proportion and things like that, especially in 3D, that's the hardest stuff to understand, even from a fashion flat.
Yeah.
If you're not putting it on an avatar, it's hard to tell what the pants and the top are going to look like together.
Right. Right.
How to
Right.
style things together. That's a cool thing you can do in 3D. That's a great way to use CAD software.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. So, do you have a favorite tool or a favorite function in Clo and in Illustrator?
Oh gosh. Okay. In Clo, I love the speedy render. In my
Hmm.
gaming computer, I have two computers. I just got the Mac, the 3 Max, the crazy one that does 3D. And that one's actually working for Clo. It's cool. Very
Really?
fast.
Oh
Yeah,
my
it doesn't
gosh.
it doesn't have a graphics card, so but it renders beautifully. But there's no speedy mode on that. You have to have a graphics card to use the fast mode.
Okay,
So you
okay.
have to have a PC to use that one. So I like that in Clo, and in Illustrator, I love outline view, Command Y,
Really?
because this job for me is pretty new, and I go into people's sketches, and maybe they wouldn't have sketched the way that I would, as cleanly as I would, with
Hmm.
an outline, and then I have everything grouped a certain way. But sometimes there's just a mess happening there, and I don't know what's going on, and I cannot grab what I want. And Command Y is like X-ray. I want that stitch line, and I can just pull it out. I don't have to click into 5,000 layers to get it. So
Right,
that's
right.
and then the rotate with the little, and you can turn the pattern around. That's my other favorite.
Interesting, interesting. It's funny that you say the Command Y because a lot of my students would end up in outline mode, and I think Y is next to like me. Maybe it's U or oh no, it's not Command Y. It's Command H. That's the one. But I feel like Command Y was another one. But it's like next to other things, like it may be like they were trying to join, and instead of hitting J, they hit
Yeah,
H or something
yeah,
like that. But they would find themselves in that mode, and then they'd be like, "Oh my God, what did I
yeah,
do?" And like nobody liked outline mode, and I was like, "Calm down, just hit Command Y again. It's totally fine."
yeah. The one
I
I
think
hate. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, oh no, I was just gonna say I think you're the first person I know who's ever said that they actually like
Outline
outline
mode.
mode.
Because
Yes.
because sometimes you just like you when you go into someone else's sketches and they're just like layering chunks of stuff and it's all clipping masked and you
Oh, I
can't see
know.
what's going on. I'm a big clipping mask fan too, but like, it's a mess in there. Sometimes Command Y is just an easier way to see what's going on. You can also see how many stray points there are, and then the cleanup function is very nice for that too.
Yes.
I'm very like cleanly. I just hear my first boss in my head. Like, what is this? Why is this not grouped a certain way?
I know.
Yeah. So I
Yeah.
still sketch that way.
Yeah. That's a great way to sketch coming from a teacher and a former freelancer. Cause I'm like, I used to tell people, I'm like, look, I gotta come in there and clean up this mess. So I need you to group.
Yep.
All right. So, what has been the most challenging thing you've created using either of the digital software? And what's been the most fun?
Oh gosh. Okay. When I was doing my portfolio for Clo, we had some stuff that we did in our classes. I took classes at FIT
Mhm.
to start off learning Clo. And then I went on, looked at some runway images of things I wanted to try to recreate that I didn't know if were possible.
Yeah.
And I did this, Celine did this collection where they were kind of outside wearing these like leather, beautiful jackets, and then these crazy skirts that look like bells. Like they
Hmm.
were like rigid crinolines and they kind of moved a little, and then they were like covered in sequins, and they were wearing like
I think I
motorcycle boots. It was so cool.
remember that.
Yeah. So I was like, I'm gonna make that skirt. I had, I was like freezing in Clo, so that when I generated it wouldn't like fall. I found a bottom structure that I used, like
Mhm.
a crinoline, basically like a wire crinoline, and put that under it. But then you could see all the bumps. And then in the end, I ended up creating like a gored skirt and giving it a little bit of puff, turning off the puff, simulating it until it was just right, and then freezing it. And that's how I was able to do that. And that took me probably like 6 hours to figure that out.
Wow.
So that was a
Oh
tough one. And then I had to do all the sequins one line at a time, all the way
my
around the skirt.
gosh.
And now if I think about going in, I would use Maya for that, right?
Yeah.
And then I would probably texture it in a different program where I could get the sequins to be a little more sparkly and realistic looking.
Wow.
Um, yeah.
Would you ever try to recreate that?
Um, I probably wouldn't go back to that one. At the end of this program, the leather jacket turned out beautifully, and that it did turn out really
Hmm.
well. The At the end of the 3D program I was doing, I ended up not finishing it because I got this job. And the last part of it was just 6 weeks of building an asset in 3D based off of what you've learned. And I was really struggling because I wanted to incorporate Clo 3D into what I learned with Maya and Mari. And I found this image of an artist had just done this sketch where he had all these famous costumes from movies in these glass domes,
Oh,
like,
wow.
like a candy jar.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then they were all on like little pedestals, and one of them was like the Cleopatra from Elizabeth Taylor. It
Wow.
was like all these famous movie costumes, and I was like, someday, because I would really have to use something else to figure that out and then
Yeah.
blend the programs together. And that's like one of my goals. That's my next big thing to figure out. Is someday I'm going to figure that situation out.
So which one, what do you think was the most fun that you've already done?
Oh gosh. Um, I was working for a company and I had to make a lot of their fabrics.
Hmm.
I had to make all of their 3D fabrics and I helped like train them in Clo. And I would be given these fabrics where I was like, oh gosh, how am I gonna make this? I don't know. And I knew enough about maps, 3D maps to know like this does this, but you have to figure it out for the first time each time. It's always a new challenge. And I made this beautiful plissé satin fabric. And then I did the lettuce on the edges with the stitching and like created the maps for all of that. And that was actually really rewarding to see those styles when they were lit and rendered. They were so beautiful.
Yeah, that sounds like it would be. You have to post that
I
somewhere. It sounds cool.
can't because it's not mine.
Oh man, man. Ugh,
I
I hate when
know.
that happens. When
I
you're just like,
know.
this looks so cool. I can't show it to anybody.
I know. I know. I can probably show you the fabric, but I can't show you the styles. But maybe
Gotcha.
I'll put it into something else that I can show it to you.
We have one comment from Will Nolan who says, cool stuff. Finn's the best in London, so bedtime for me. Great to learn a bit about this. Thanks. Thanks to Will Nolan.
Thanks, Will.
So are you currently working on anything new? Any new projects?
Yes. Gosh, my client, like the company I work for now, I probably have about 10 clients, maybe more, and they're all
Hmm.
in various seasons, sometimes duplicate seasons. So I have a lot on my plate. And I actually met with one of the clients today, and he gets 3 sketch reviews in Illustrator, and then we're going to be moving on to 3D for him. So it'll be really fun to do 3D for the first time for this new job. And like my other project is to help find ways to move 3D to integrate 3D into our processes, maybe in a less traditional way,
Hmm.
using all these different tools and seeing what works best. So that's fun.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so we also have some comments from Nikkei 22 who says, hey Finn, I think I know that boss you're talking about with the sketching. Yay, outline mode. Another person who likes outline mode. Look
We
at
both worked at that company together with that boss. So she knows exactly about how that woman wanted everything sketched.
that. All right. Question. Mouse, stylus, or trackpad?
So that same boss, I sat down at my desk, my first real job, and she took my mouse and handed me a Wacom tablet and said, "You're going to sketch with this." And my screen faced the door, and everyone could see me struggling. I couldn't draw. I felt like someone had taken my hand away. But I'm so grateful for that. So definitely sketching with a Wacom tablet and Illustrator will not only save your wrist, but it also gives you a beautiful hand when you sketch,
Yes.
and makes all of the little stuff that you add at the end, all the nice little lines and gathers look so much better. And
Hmm.
then after having to go back to a 3-button mouse to do 3D, which you need for most 3D,
Yeah.
and my wrist was killing me because it had been years since I used that, I got this Logitech Lift, which is an
Hmm.
ergonomic mouse, and it has saved my wrist, and it's such a comfortable mouse. So if you're going to be using a mouse,
Nice.
get an ergonomic one because you're gonna screw up your wrist if you don't.
Nice. Yeah. I'm gonna have to look into that because I've started doing a lot more 3D. And even before then, when I was like, drawing a lot in Illustrator, and I went through a phase where like my wrist was killing me. Like, and I always knew when I was doing too much during the semester and I was on the computer too much because like my wrist was killing me. And I was like, okay, I got to take some time off.
Yeah.
Oof.
The Logitech Lift is probably one of the best mouse. My wife also started using it, and
Nice.
it saved her wrist. But yeah, when I was in Clo for 8 hours a day, I was starting to get like so much pain in my wrist that I couldn't even like pick anything up, and so I had to switch. And it's a really natural transition because instead of being like this, you're just like a handshake, so it doesn't torque your shoulder either. And
Nice.
I can be in Clo all day, and it doesn't my wrist don't hurt anymore. So
That's
highly recommend.
amazing. I will make sure I will be emailing you about that.
Okay.
There is a question in the chat from MedThread Shop. Can Chloe make pattern pieces? That would be a yes,
Yes.
right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So to start making anything in 3D, you have two sides to your screen. You have your 3D side and your 2D side. So you make the pattern. You can start from patterns that already exist and then usually adapt those. That's how most people start. That's also how I tend to start. Um, and then you generate and it'll show it on the avatar and you can change something on the pattern and watch it directly change on the avatar, which is such a great
Yeah.
feature. And yeah, so definitely it does make pattern pieces for sure. And you can add seam allowance as well.
Yes. Yes. And there's a lot of really great things that you can do in Clo. I'm sure you can do it in Browser too, but I don't know where it is. But as far as like if you have to print out patterns,
Yes.
I think it does a marker as well.
Yes. Yes.
Um, yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead.
So there's another company that I had done some work for where they actually worked in 3D and they made stuff on demand and they basically made the marker with the prints inside of each pattern piece instead of printing on
Yes.
yardage. And then they would print that, cut out those pattern pieces and sew on demand. So you could literally, as long as it's made out of the same fabric, it would optimize the marker for you. It was a really cool way to work.
Yeah, that is a cool way to work. Awesome. All right. Well, look at that. We're out of time already. So how can people find you on social? And if anybody decided that they wanted to work with you or work with the company, how could they do that?
So you can find me here on Instagram. My handle is Sharkafin. And that we have my wife and I, we have a brand called Requin, which is basically the French word for shark. And we live by the beach here in New York. So
Wow.
that's where it all comes
Mhm.
from. So REQUINNYC.com is our website if you want to have a look at what we've made. And you can find me on Instagram and at Stateless Design and Consulting.
Nice. Nice. Well, thank you so much
You're
for being
welcome.
on CAD Chats this month and for sharing all of your great information about your previous experience with Illustrator and in Clo 3D and a little bit of Browseware. Um, but yeah, thank you so much for agreeing to be on this. And thank you to everyone who tuned in. And I will see you next month. And make sure you follow Finn at Sharkafin
Yes.
and check out her line
Hmm.
and her and her partner's line.
Yes.
Say it one more time.
So it's
Reckon. Mhm.
REQUINNYC.com. Yep.
There it
And
is.
you
All
can
right,
find
everybody. Go ahead. Go ahead.
my website at thincronin.com.
Oh, and fincronin.com.
Wonderful, yeah. All right.
All right, you all. Thank you so much. Have a
Thank
great
you.
night.
Bye.
Bye.